So let me introduce pause to you and our session tonight, which is bringing our values to light, as Neil said. I think once we're a small group, I might change our program a little bit so we all get a chance to speak and really enjoy this work, actually. So I might just change a few things around. But really, to introduce pause to you, pause was born about 15 years ago. And it was through a conversation that I had with various people who were looking for somewhere where they could be themselves without their masks, in a safe space where they could share and feel connected, feel witnessed, validated, and be seen, and especially in the corporate field, which is where I do a lot of my work, actually. And then I was working with some teachers, and they said exactly the same thing. And then I went out for coffee with a friend who said exactly the same thing. So this is how pause was born, really. And I had a vision through a meditation at the Brahma Kumaris, where I was urged, if you like, to register pause and really focus on that. And it was strange because I didn't know why at the time, but I knew something was coming in a worldwide sense that would make us pause, and then the pandemic happened. So I think it's been a while in the making, and I've had to do a lot of offloading of my own stuff, so to say, to be in that space of holding a space to pause. And I'm very grateful to lots of different people who've helped me and supported me on the way, especially Living Values in Education and the BKs and many other people. So what do we do with pause? We have a pause circle, which is 90 minutes, where we invite people just to come along, find a place of relaxing, find a place of what we call deep listening, listening beyond ourselves, or as Otto Scharmer would call it, level 4 listening. And we learn, we come together, we learn, we practice, and we develop insight and empathy so that we can be more present. And in being more present, we usually find ourselves being more compassionate with ourselves, and that extends to that compassion with others. So in my own little mind, my little bubble, I feel like this is my gift that's arrived, that is here for society, and it's almost like why I was born. It feels like my bud is beginning to blossom. So that's really what this is all about. And we're saying now that peaceful belonging is at the root of all this. And I do a lot of work recently with expats and with people who didn't feel that they belonged. And that also includes refugees, asylum seekers, probation. And it's amazing how many people don't really feel that they belong. So a lot of that work that I'm doing now and some research that I'm doing now, it's around the sense of belonging. And I do think that we all need space to babble a little bit, which is what I feel I'm doing a little bit now. But it's to enter into conversations where we can explore and just find out who we are ourselves and who we choose to be ourselves and how we want to share ourselves. And these safe space conversations that we have through pause really are places to babble, but really share what's up for us. So we don't have to put that brave face on all the time. We can just be ourselves and be accepted as who we are as ourselves. So I'm going to introduce you to our first practice, which is to pause. And as we pause, I'd like you to notice where your feet are on the ground. And more than that, notice how your feet are on the ground. Is your left foot inside? Is the weight on your right foot? Are your feet facing forwards? How far are they apart? Just notice that connection to the earth. And then notice the crown of your head. And what we call the length from the soles of our feet to the crown of our heads. That represents in our somatic distinctions our sense of pride and dignity. And that might sound obvious, but it's really quite interesting. Are we overextending ourselves so that we're being seen, pushing, striving? Are we not in our natural true length, frightened of being seen, want to stay under the parapet, so to say? Are we owning our natural true length? And we're in our natural true length, in our pride and dignity, our authentic pride and dignity, we begin to relax the nervous system of fight, flight, or freeze. Our adrenaline rush. Now notice your width. From the top of your crown, down the sides of your head, down your neck, your shoulders, your arms, torso, your hips. As you sit on your chair, right down to the ground. And the width in our somatic distinctions represents our safety and belonging. You might notice just how you're holding yourself. Are you feeling squeezed in? Or are you feeling very expansive? Just notice. Nothing wrong, just notice. And pay attention to your back. Back represents everything that's gone before, our ancestral path. We're at the leading edge of our ancestors. And we are the ancestors of our future selves. The back represents our history, our experience, our trainings, our loves, our hates, our genetics. And it's there to help us, to reassure us, for us to have a sense of pride and maybe forgiveness even. It's what's gone before, and our front, our soft open front, represents the yearning of where we are right now and the allowing of what is to come. So as we pause now for just a minute in silence, really reconnect, to remember yourself, for your length, your width, and your depth. Thank you. So now, if you will, I'd like us to practice a little breathing experiment almost, to create a coherence or a field of coherence. And we do this by breathing together. You might find that if you're in a group or in a one-to-one, it's the best way to deepen rapport is to breathe at the same pace as the other. Creates a deeper sense of connection, a feeling of recognition, of respect and of safety. So, you might be able to see my hands. I have my palms out in front of me, and I'd like you to do the same. And as we breathe in, we bring our palms and our to make a fist towards us. This represents our sense of receiving. As we exhale out, we open our hands and our palms and we give. So we receive and we give. I'm going to offer some counted breath work, and we do this together. So you can do this with your eyes open or your eyes closed, or eyes lowered. It's your choice. Okay, so take a deep breath in and close your hands. Receiving. And exhale, opening your palms and giving. Inhaling, closing the palms, exhaling, opening. We'll do this for 5 more times in your own pace, but keeping this rhythm. Notice what you're receiving. Notice what you're giving. Thank you. And then put your hands on your lap when you feel ready. How are you feeling right now? Hands up, thumbs up. Good. That's great. We have this as a practice because when we come to our listening piece, we can't really listen well if we're stressed or tense or thinking of something else. The real listening comes from a place of presence. And I've found myself this is one of the quickest ways to come to presence. So now I'm going to take you through a guided visualization where we are looking at our length, our width, our depth, our yearning, our belonging, our opening, our receiving, our giving. Just listen to my words and let them resonate with you in whichever way you'd like them to, or you choose them to. Again, with your eyes open or your eyes closed. Take a deep breath in. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Find yourself resting in a place of peace, of balance, of respect. Find yourself resting in a place where compassion fills every cell of your body. Find yourself sitting in a place where health abounds, beyond even your imagination. And just for this moment in time, allow your body to rest. Rest in the essence of yourself, in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, your spirit. letting the whole body become as one within itself. Just for a moment, forget about your to-do list, your wish list. You don't wish to-do list. Just let that go. If you like, no need to no longer remember what went on before. The only moment to savour is this present moment of now. If there is a part of your body that holds tension, allow it. Invite it. Sit with it as if it was a tiny child seeking your attention. Listen to it. Care for it and soothe it. For most traumas in the body are a longing to be seen. They're like tiny ripples of the past, coming from the ocean to the shore, to be glorified, seen, witnessed, heard, and then let back into the ocean. There's a greatness in you that your body wishes you to recognize, and this is that your body knows how to heal itself. So when we are in the space of togetherness, we can share our deepest wishes of gratitude and respect of the other, and allow our bodies to receive this in a way that is open and receiving to yourself. And if you are struggling to receive for whatever reason, notice that. Just like we take our breath, we breathe in and we breathe out in equal amounts. We give and receive in equal amounts. Often we love and fear in equal amounts, however, love prevails most of the time. This is an invitation for you to find yourself in your space, in your contentment, in your joyousness, in your fullness, in your presence that is transformational, both to yourself and to the other. It is a unique gift that is only yours to share. And it is a unique gift that is only yours to receive. I invite you to share your gift well and receive the gifts from others in an open-hearted and generous way. And finding your feet on the ground, connecting to our beautiful earth that has shared so much with us. Find yourself in your length, proud, visible, ready. Notice your breath as you breathe in, and as you breathe out. When you feel ready, bring a smile to your face. Open your eyes, connect back with me and our group. Thank you. So let's have a quick check-in. How are you today? How are you right now? Awake, asleep, relaxed, ready to listen? Yeah, good. Thank you. Jan, could you move the PowerPoints on, please, to the one that's got the Rumi quote on it? It's about the third or fourth one. Fourth, I think. Here we go. Thank you. So these are, well, the Rumi quote is one of my favourites. It's not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you've built against it. This is why we say pause is a layering. It's an entry point for wherever you are to find yourself, to take off all those overcoats and masks that we have established for ourselves for whichever reasons over our many years of being on this planet. And I suggest that poetry is one way to access and evoke and share this deep love that's really within us all. I was just about to say written within us all, and I think it probably is written within us all. And what I want to do now, I think, is I'll read a poem, and then I'd like us to create a small conversation around the poem and what the poem means for you. And this is a poem by a lady called Wendy Cope. And I'll read it, and then it is on a PowerPoint, Joanne, 2 from here, please. Next one. Here we go. This is called The Orange. Okay. At lunchtime, I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. I peeled it and shared it with Robert and Dave. They got quarters and I had a half. And that orange, it made me so happy, as ordinary things often do. Just lately, the shopping, a walk in the park. This is peace and contentment. It's new. The rest of the day was quite easy. I did all the jobs on my list and enjoyed them and had some time over. I love you. I'm glad I exist. It's such a sweet poem. And it evokes all sorts of things in different people. So I'm really interested to hear what it evokes in you.
I go first. It's a beautiful poem, Wendy. Not that's Wendy the person. It's a beautiful poem, Sue, because for me it celebrates the natural, ordinary things of life. It seems to me, thinking about myself often in the past, always seeking something else, some other, whereas this is reminding us to really be joyous about the simple things of life, the daily routines, the visit to the shop, and to be in the present when you're doing that. I always remember the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, you know, whatever you do, be mindful and fully engaged and present in that activity. And you invest it with a lot of love. Because you use that self-energy in that activity. So for me, this was a reminder really to really be joyous about the simple things, the daily habits we have, and not to just scurry by unaware of what's going on. So that's me.
Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I like I like the orange because somehow it conveys such a beautiful, bit like the sun, you know, a kind of a big brightness. And you can almost experience the, you know, as she peels it, I can kind of feel all the juice sort of splattering, and how that's a kind of shared experience with these other two people. So something about that first verse, that in the ordinariness and yet the vivid brightness and multi-layered experience of peeling an orange.
Thank you, Joanne.
And for me, Sue, beautiful poem there. And it reminds us to look at everything, everyday things anew. Look at things freshly. For example, today, the beautiful autumn colours here in Northumberland. And just to look at awe and wonder at the beauty of nature. That really touched me. Yet, in the first verse, there was one little question I had. He was sharing it with Robert and Dave, not equally. There was a big half. And it reminds me of a story, a very brief story of a beautiful lady who belongs to Living Values, who were working in Africa. And the children were hungry, and she had one orange in her bag. And she only had one orange, and she gave it to a child. And the child didn't eat it or hide it. She shared one piece with each of her friends, and they ate it slowly. So it's a token of love. Nature's there to share with others equally, and of course from our own presence. Your beautiful poem there. Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you.
Nice. Yeah.
I like the fact that having shared and having laughed, that the rest of the day was quite easy. Because if you kind of can have that contentment, have that feeling, then all the jobs that you may have looked at, if you're feeling happy, you've shared something, you've given something, then everything just goes so easily and you get it all done. And I love you. I like that. I'm glad I exist. I love you. It is beautiful. Thank you.
My pleasure. I love this little poem. It's one of my favourites, I have to say.
See, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think for me, the line that is somewhat disturbing me, but also bringing peace, kind of, this is peace and contentment. It's new. And I can see that we ought to feel peace and contentment. And that's a very important human condition, to always seek peace and contentment. And of course, it is always new. It's never the same. But it's different kinds of peace and contentment, but never the same. We have to live and live with new things.
Yeah, I get that, because for me it's like I can be really peaceful and contented at 7 o'clock in the morning after I've meditated for an hour or whatever. And then life suddenly starts.
That's right. That's right.
I open the curtains and poof, there we are. So, you know, and sometimes it's pleasant and sometimes it's not always like that. So, yeah. But I do believe, and this is my belief, I have to say, but I do believe that inside of me, deep down inside of me, is that peacefulness that is always there. If I allow myself to just stay with it, so to say, get out of my own way to some extent.
I was just thinking that the other day when I was weeding the last bit of the garden, and I hate weeding. I hate weeding with a passion. And I thought, you know, I should be at peace even if it's weeding the garden. And what brought me peace was the thought, well, that's going to be the last time this year. And I was at peace.
And do you believe the weeds are at peace with you?
Well, to be honest, I haven't reflected much on the weeds. I can't say that my spirituality is as advanced as that, Sue. I just hate them.
I'm teasing. I know the feeling. Okay. Anybody else?
The poem made me chuckle, and the thought after that was, you know, that if something makes you chuckle, and like you said, if something makes you chuckle and sets you up, then actually the rest of the day can be quite easy. But you have to keep remembering that, though. If you let it drift, the list might not be very easy at all. And I thought that was something to remember during the day. And like Peter, I walked along today and there were tiny little maple leaves, little yellow ones on the ground. They looked like stars and they were absolutely beautiful. And just to see beauty in small things sets you up for the rest of the day as well.
I'll share this with you. Wendy, apparently, she's not somebody that I've met personally. Apparently she wrote this on the first day after lockdown stopped. You know, when we could go back into the open, so to say. Apparently that was the day she wrote this poem. So there's something about an aliveness for me, of a newness and an enjoyment of just the simple things of connecting with people as well, you know. So yeah.
I think that's one of the things that lockdown brought us, if we were prepared to notice it and not think that we ought to be somewhere else or doing something else or not where we actually were. It brought a simplicity and having to face up to ourselves and perhaps the limited things that were around them and take pleasure in them rather than artificiality that we might be wanting to rush out to explore.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask a question now because I'm curious about this. What is it, do you think, that makes some poems come alive for you and some just, you know, like reading a paper or whatever, you read it, forget it sort of thing? What is it that makes a poem significant?
I think for me, it's a kind of phrase that catches the inner self somewhere. And it only takes a word or a phrase or a little part of it to ignite a kind of feeling of oneness with it. And in that poem, there were two things: peace and contentment, and I love you. I'm glad I exist.
I think it's when it gives me a kind of different perspective about something, you know, that resonates inside somewhere, makes me see something differently or experience something differently.
Something that touches the heart of all. It certainly touched me, I'm sure, in different ways. It's touching everybody who's listening tonight. And so beautiful.
I was going to say, I was asked in a poetry group that I now belong to, actually, and I said, I think memorable poetry for me makes me access or encourages me to access the senses. It's almost like I can see the orange. I can, like Jonathan, I can almost imagine it being peeled and shared. I can almost imagine the taste of it. It appeals to the senses, and I think that's what brings the poem for me alive. I don't know.
Yes, I agree with that about appealing to the senses, but for me, poetry has to be read aloud. I grew up in a family where my father was always reading poetry, and particularly Dylan Thomas, him being Welsh as well as Thomas. And so I remember sitting outside his study on the veranda at the open window listening. So from then on, as a very young child, as soon as I had a book of poetry or I saw a poem, it had to be read aloud. You had to share it. So rhythm and the words and the flow, you know, it kind of is there tugging at my heartstrings. It's something that I immerse myself in. And this poem, of course, reminds me of Blake. It is Blake, isn't it? To see the world in a grain of sand or something like that. Again, all this poetry, you've just got to shout it out and live it and love it and dance. It's so, you know, anyway, I'm just rambling on. That's what I think about poetry.
My childhood experiences, I grew up in a home that was quite absent of books, generally speaking. And I remember Christmas 1956, of all dates, when my grandmother gave me a child's garden of verses. And with this was one of the first books that I was ever given. And I remember, I think I was fairly slow learning to read, slow at everything really. And but I remember learning these poems, and many of them stay with me today. I'm just thinking of one now. A birdie with a yellow bill hopped upon my windowsill, cocked his shining eye and said, "Ain't you shamed, you sleepyhead?" I just remember learning all these little poems, and that obviously, thank you, Stevenson, for igniting a passion. Much later in life, about 15 years ago, I went to Kalamazoo in the United States. Lovely term. It's famous for banjo making or something. And I went to a Courage to Teach occasion, which a great educator called Parker Palmer was the initiator of. Parker Palmer is a great Quaker. And the Courage to Teach program was all about sitting in a circle and really thinking about poetry. And I don't know if any of you know the woodcutter, but that was brought to life for me. And that whole event, Courage to Teach, transformed at that time much of my thinking. And I made a few changes in my life because of sitting with colleagues like we are now and sharing. I'm gaining so much just listening to your interpretations of this poem. That's why I love this idea, Sue, of a poetry circle. Jane, my wife, belongs to a book club, but I think a poetry club appeals to me. Enough of me.
You. Yes, I got more involved with poetry this year because of my connection with the Values Alliance through Living Values in Education. And they had a poetry initiative for, started off actually just with children's schools, and then it's gone to adults and whatever. And we all got into writing poems. And I will never say that I would be a poet of any extraordinary talent, I don't think, really. But it was a way of sharing who I am and getting in touch with my deepest reflections, maybe, and actually just allowing the pen to write itself. Was really quite interesting, the whole thing. And one of the areas that I'm really very interested in is when we listen to poetry, we're listening from the side of our brain which actually accesses music. It's the creative side. you know, we're not in the left part of the brain where we're sort of literally going through things. We're in that more musicality part of our brain. And I think that's more restful for who we are. We create our own tempo from that. And we get into our own rhythm from that. So I think poetry has a real sense of, it's not just the words, it's there's something beyond the words actually that resonates. I can't put it into words, but there's something beyond words in some poetry for me that accesses something really deep. And I think it accesses it through the senses and through my imagination and through my creativity. And I think really, for truth be known, at the essence of everybody, that's who they like to be. We're here to create. We're here to imagine. We're here to evolve. We're here to evoke things in ourselves and within other people. And this circle, I first came across circles when I was living in North America with a lady called Grandmother Twyla, who was a Seneca elder. And I'd been invited there for a couple of weeks. I ended up living there for about 6 months, something like that. And everything was done in a circle. You'd eat breakfast in a circle, you'd eat lunch in a circle, you'd share the peace pipe in a circle, you'd tell the stories in a circle, you'd resolve issues in a circle. Everything was in a circle. And it was like there was no beginning, no end. So there was something also about the circle of life within there, if you like. But it kept it a sacred space, and I think that's what the circle is for me. It's a sacred space for sharing and witnessing and being validated and being respected. And just being ordinary, and ordinary in an extraordinary way, or extraordinary in an ordinary way, whichever way you want to look at it. So this time,
I've never shared this with anyone before, but let me just be provoked into sharing it. At one time, I was principal of a college, and I used to have to give graduation addresses. And I used to think, what in the name of goodness can I say that's relevant or new or interesting or... and these were in the days when, far from typing things onto a screen, I had, in fact, I've got one here, I used a fountain pen to write the speech. And that was the significance of it, was writing it with a fountain pen, and to prepare myself for 2 or 3 days beforehand, maybe even up to a week, I used to read poetry. I'm not someone who has a great passion for music. I don't listen to a lot of music, a little more now than I used to, but I didn't at that time. But I read poetry, and I found the rhythm of poetry. It's really what Sean was saying earlier about the rhythm, the listening to it, the reading it out loud. That gave me a kind of flow of thought that seemed to me to influence what I wrote in a graduation address. It was just because these graduation addresses, you've got to appear as if you've learned joined up writing, and you want to say something to them. I thought poetry somehow opened the mind for me, opened my spirit, opened the emotion to allow me to say things that otherwise I probably wouldn't have thought. I think some people may use music for that. I personally don't, but I think poetry can do that.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm feeling, Sue, here, it's often said that music is created by the space between the notes. Yet what I'm learning this evening is that poetry opens that space between the words. It really does touch the spirit and brings out the emotion. And reflecting how this gathering this evening, this circle of thought, is going deeper and deeper. And I really, really like this. Thank you.
Thank you. It feels a real honor for me to share what I love with people who, some of you I know, some of you I don't know so well. Yeah, I think we all have this common desire, if you like, to share and feel something, some sensation, or have something evoked in us. And I think poetry sometimes has helped me keep my sanity, I would say. If I'm having a really, really bad time, there's certain poets that I will just grab something off the shelf and read the poem and ground myself again. It's, you know, when we lose, when we're getting really stressed or off center or whatever, the first place where we lose our balance is our feet. Which is really why it's important for me anyway to notice where our feet are and connect with the ground, because that's what brings us to earth, so to say. You know, it's the quickest way of centering yourself and relaxing the nervous system, for sure. And Yoko Ono, I found one of her quotes the other day, which was that release your emotion in order to keep your sanity. And I think, you know, sometimes, yes, some people have therapists and all the rest of it, but so many people suppress their emotions. So many people, or there isn't the space for them to be heard or shared or witnessed, or our voice, we have no space to voice whatever. When I work with people with trauma, most of the time, they have had no voice to explain what happened, or to share what happened, or to be heard and really feel validated and witnessed. And once that voice can have its say, so to say, and it might be a voice from being a baby, it might be a voice from 3 or 4, 5, 6, it could be a voice from teens, it could be any voice. But once that voice has its say, actually the body seems to regain its inner balance in a bigger way as well. And I think poetry evokes that. This is why I say I think sometimes poetry, I'm not saying every time, but I think sometimes poetry has that potential for healing. It certainly has a potential for opening conversations. I'm just going to finish, because I'm aware of our time, by saying this as well, though. I think we listen differently from the mood and emotion that we're in. And when we're listening from a more still, relaxed place, we can listen more intently and more deeply and let whatever that emotion is that's stirred in us resonate more. And there was some research done, I'm not too sure when it was a few years back now, I think, that a person who's speaks at on average 125 words a minute, or between 125 and 150 words a minute. And yet we have the capacity to listen at 400 words a minute. So if you think of the implications of that, we can think quicker than the person can talk. So when I work with people who've got issues with distraction or whatever, or boredom, or they switch off, and especially on Zoom calls, I see it quite frequently, and I'm really happy that that doesn't seem to be happening now. But a lot of people try and do this active listening for hours and hours and hours upon time. It's virtually impossible, because the brain is so far ahead, or the thinking is so far ahead of the person who's speaking. So when we get to that point, and if I'm working with somebody who's going for an interview, for example, they're ahead of the interviewer. They're 2 questions further down the line, and they're not listening to the question that's being asked. That's your typical everyday example of it. So this part of being really still and centered when you're listening For me, it enhances your listening and it offers that deeper respect to the one being heard. That's just my perception of it. But I'd like you to think of that as you go about your everyday lives. When you get fraught or irritated with somebody who's not listening for whatever reason, they've probably already thought about what you're saying, or they're not ready to hear what you're saying, or they're not in a good space to hear. But there we go. That's life.